breaking down everyday workplace issues and diagnosing the hidden sickness, not just the obvious symptom. Our hosts, James and Kobe.
Did we lose a patient?
No, that's just my lunch.
Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Kobe, he's James, and let's get started with a question. What is the technical founder paradox?
Yeah, so this is an interesting phenomenon that I've seen play out in a lot of small and medium businesses, not only with our work at Roman 3, but even going back to like my economic development days. Essentially, the technical founder paradox, it's a name that we've given to the idea that there comes a time in the natural life cycle for many small and medium businesses where the depth of knowledge and skills that were required to really launch the business and to kind of gain that initial market penetration and market share actually ends up becoming a bit of a roadblock that keeps the company from being able to kind of push through that next hurdle and continue to grow and scale. And so there's kind of four questions or elements that I think would be interesting for us to explore in our conversation. So what is it and how does it happen? Where do we see it and kind of what does it look like? What are some warning signs that we can try to identify whether or not we are falling into this technical founder paradox trap? And then ultimately, what can we do about this?
Yeah, and it's something that it's funny because I not that long ago, a few weeks ago, I gave a keynote and I mentioned this when I was talking about kind of trends in different sectors around retention and labor attraction. And it was something that, I kind of just kind of brought up when I was talking about the common things that happen in like in that keynote I was talking about like high tech like ICT those types of things. I was saying this is very common when very technical positions this the leadership team that creates it can end up becoming having a difficult time with scalability when the skills that got them to where they are not the skills that they need to get to the next stage. And I had a few people actually come. I've had a few conversations since then. People have referenced that, and and it's funny because we mentioned it in our last episode, and we've had some comments from listeners about that too. So it's something that I think I'm really glad that we're taking a whole episode to talk about it
Yeah.
because it is something that people seem to really kind of be connecting with.
And I want to provide a little bit of clarity because we call it the technical founder paradox, but we're not talking, it's not the tech founder paradox. It's not one specific type of skill set. It is what happens. So we start businesses because we have from our own expertise, right?
Right.
Now, I'm talking broad strokes majority of the time. We have an expertise in education, in training, in human resource management. So we built a business around that. We identified a market gap. We have solutions to fix the problems that we see in this marketplace, and we've kind of constructed our business around that. That is a very natural progression and how many businesses start. A founder or group of founders have a deep technical knowledge around a particular niche or industry, and they build a business from the ground up to solve the problems that they've identified within that industry. And by doing that, you can, when you're small and nimble, you're able to respond and react very quickly. You're able to use your deep technical knowledge to kind of guide the growth of the company. The paradox that we're talking about, where that kind of comes into play, is once you're beyond that initial kind of startup phase and the company is growing, you're adding employees, you're adding layers or levels of authority within the company. And the founders are no longer required to do a lot of the work. Now, they still have to do a lot of work, but they're not doing a lot of the day-to-day hands-on development of product service work.
They're not in the weeds.
They're not in the weeds. Their responsibilities have grown from having to do everything and deliver their product, create or deliver their product or service, to more of a business development, leadership, growth strategy angle.
Yeah.
And the skills that were required that made them so successful in the early stages and got them to where they are outdated. It's a mismatch of skill sets. And now they're in a position where the depth of knowledge that they have is not equal to the breadth of responsibilities that they need to perform.
Yeah, and you're right. So the term technical, we definitely don't want people to confuse it with tech, because I think the best way to kind of really kind of flesh out what it is when we say technical founder is a few podcasts ago we did an episode about what's called like what skills required to be successful, and in there we talked about the difference between technical skills and employability skills.
Mm-hmm.
And when we say the technical founder, we mean that person that is an expert on the technical components of their jobs. But again, but like we've seen this in, the hospitality industry. We've seen this in the education industry. We've seen it in tech. We've even seen it in nonprofits. It's not that it's about the person that has this, this doctorate of engineering and it's only about that. It's about someone has a great depth of knowledge in the technical aspects, like the work, the product, the service aspects of an industry. And like I said, create a business to fill that need, and that need is doing well. Then they at some point hit a wall, and the wall is usually around when they're trying to scale the business. That the skills that got them to the success they have today are the exact likely skills that are going to hold them back as they try and move up they try and level up the business.
Yeah, and I think it would be really helpful for us to talk about, like, you identified a couple different places where we've seen it. The nonprofit example is always one that I've found interesting. There are some really cool ones that I say cool from it sucked for the business because they were struggling, but I think it makes for a good illustrative point. So this particular example was a community-focused nonprofit delivering services in the community. That was their intent. If you've ever worked in a nonprofit or in anything that's reliant on government funding, then you understand the sheer volume of paperwork that's involved in the formation and the accessing grants and reporting requirements and all of the what I would find mind-numbing aspects of that, the administrative requirements. It is foundational and fundamental and so important in the formation of a not-for-profit that skill set is absolutely essential. And what we saw was a founder, the person who kind of kicked this organization off, had a very strong skill set in that they were an excellent administrator. They were able to chase funding. They were working with partners. They were reporting on it. They were able to keep very busy in making sure that everything in terms of the reporting requirements were handled very, very well. Where they ran into problems was on the people side. Once it required people to deliver services, they unfortunately were out of their element.
Yeah. I remember this was an executive director, and the executive director they knew the services of the sector so well. Like again, a lot of EDs that go into nonprofits, like, if you're for example, if you're into mental health services, usually the person has a strong mental health background. They know
Yes.
mental health, right? And you're right, and having that ability to understand kind of the infrastructural work of a nonprofit. And this person kind of had both that infrastructural, like, startup administrative pieces down cold,
Yeah.
and they had a deep knowledge of the topic of the services that they provided, but they did not have the leadership skills, the management skills, the stakeholder engagement skills that they needed to actually kind of move the organization to reach what its funders and stakeholders had in mind for it.
Yeah.
And that problematic piece was, they again, they hit the wall, and then they were very, very, very busy every day, but those that were relying on the outcomes that they were supposed to provide were not seeing it, because they didn't have the ability to empower, mobilize, and provide it, through employees,
Yeah.
because they hit the wall. They couldn't do any more of it on their own. They needed to trust and have the people to deliver it for them, and they couldn't maintain this. They didn't have enough employee retention to provide consistent
Well,
service.
and honestly, one of the biggest problems was that being used to doing everything themselves and having a very administrative focus, unfortunately led to a tremendous amount of micromanagement, which you're hiring highly skilled professionals to deliver services and then putting them in a box, and it drove people away. And unfortunately, that's more common than we would like to admit.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and unfortunately, this story has the person being required to be being
Asked to step down.
yeah, exactly. And then part of the work that we did with them was helping kind of provide the new leadership and everything else like that too, to kind of help build the infrastructure for that pieces. I mean, that story didn't have a great ending, but it does speak to, I think.
Well, not every reality is not every story has a happy ending.
That's fair. But I think, though, that what I like about that example is it's a good way to indicate we're not just talking about tech. We're not just talking about
Yes.
about high science and high, what I mean, and very, very
Anyone with that depth of knowledge who
that technical understanding.
that technical understanding in one area, and this probably is gonna sound harsher than I intend it, but it's a failure to recognize the importance of the other elements of the job,
Yeah.
right? A leadership, like leading an organization,
Mhm.
is not about one particular skill set. It's about a breadth of knowledge. You
Yeah.
you don't need to do everything yourself. You should not try to do everything yourself,
Yeah.
but you need to know enough about all of the different elements of running and growing a business, so that you can hold accountable those who you empower to take on those other responsibilities. You need to know enough about marketing and sales to understand whether or not your VP of sales is actually delivering on what they need to do, right? Same with operations, same with human resources, same with um,
Procurement.
finance, right? Or procurement. You don't need to be able to have the depth of knowledge to do that job in every instance, but you need to have the breadth of knowledge to understand what's happening and make sure that it is driving the organization along towards fulfilling its goals and strategy.
Yeah, and what we've been talking about till now is really kind of answering that first question, what it is and how does it happen? Because it really is just that, is that, the skills that are now needed are not present in those who are in the leadership role, who are
Yeah.
often, who are the founders, or who are the people that are there from the beginning. And it really does, and where it really kind of hits home is when we're talking about scalability. Because one thing that I think we should just kind of clarify first is that not every business will hit this problem. Because
No.
again, when you're talking about, you saw this a lot when you were working in economic development. You tell a lot of stories of some cool small businesses. And I remember one story always sticks to my mind that I've brought up a few times, I think, was when you were working with this kind of mid-sized bakery,
Oh, yeah.
and really wonderful woman who was the founder and everything like that too. And she had no intention of turning her medium-sized bakery into like a global conglomerate. It was always going to be that lifestyle type business where it's where she gets to spend her time baking. Yes, she still has a lot of the
Yeah.
management leadership stuff to do, but she
It
doesn't really.
served the local community, and that's what she wanted for her business,
Yeah.
was something that would allow her to use her technical skill
Mhm.
set to serve her community, and it did that
Yeah.
very, very well.
Yeah, and she
She
means,
built a very profitable business doing
great
it.
living. Yes, great living because it's almost
But what
like.
was funny was it like anyways, I'll try not to rant too much. But what was funny was because of the success,
Mhm.
she got targeted by all of the like every government program
Yeah.
wanted to push her to
Mhm.
export
Yeah.
and right scale, grow, push. And she's like, no, I'm happy. This
Yeah.
is what I want from and
Yeah.
totally respect that because she identified her skill set. She knew what she was good at. She knew what, more importantly, she knew what she wanted from her business and
Yes.
she knew when she achieved it.
Yes. And
And that was,
yeah, and I remember you saying she had a difficult, one of the harder things with her was also around the people management side of it. She
yes,
liked people, but she didn't love being a boss, and it was kind of the part of the job she hated the most.
she liked
But
people. She hated managing people.
yes, exactly, yeah. So it's funny because she's like, I know how to make muffins, and I don't want to have to, but I want to have the least amount of people management responsibilities as I can. But she didn't want to grow and have someone else take it over because she didn't want the company to get that big. She made a great living doing what she loved and had a great impact on her community. There was a ceiling on how successful she could be with her structure, and she was cool with that, and she wanted to stay on this side of it. And there is nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
people in those situations, and there's probably most
There's a lot
businesses
of them.
are probably
Yeah.
in that situation, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. It's it's when you're not okay with that and you want to go past that ceiling and you want to scale. That's one of the, I guess, reflection points that you need to consider is am I being impacted by the technical founder paradox? Because scalability is what I want to achieve. So then if that's one of your stated goals, then this is something that you really might want to be thinking about.
Sometimes we refer to businesses like that as lifestyle businesses,
Yeah.
right? They have created a lifestyle for themselves.
Mhm.
And that is, they've accomplished what they set out to accomplish. And that's fantastic. But if you, like you've said, if that's not your intent, if that's not your strategy to just create a lifestyle business for yourself, and you really want to achieve that scalability, then you have to be aware of the problems that are going to come if you don't properly plan
Mhm.
and augment your skills and abilities by either well, we'll get into what you can do about it, but you need to figure out a way to make sure that you're not falling into the technical founder paradox.
Yeah, so let's jump into, so where do we see it and what does it look like? Well, I mean, we talked a
Right.
little bit about where we see it, but it really is about when small businesses are trying to grow and medium businesses have hit that wall that they hit the ceiling and and they do want to surpass it. And it's the idea of often it's when the founder or founders need to be pulled out of the everyday
Yeah.
and need to stop almost like doing the job that they're technical experts in
Yeah.
and start doing more of that strategic higher level leadership. And often the skills that they may not have built along the way, or might be very counter to their natural skill set. And that's where we really do see this.
It's not really an employee count problem.
No.
Um, we've seen this happen with, I can think of a specific example with a group of founders that were three engineers, highly skilled, friends through college, decided to start a business together. Um, they hit this wall pretty hard around 50 employees
Yeah.
because they built a fantastic product. But it was also like the first job any of them had ever had out of college.
Right.
So none of them had any experience managing people, which caused some problems,
Yeah,
politely.
exactly. So, and I think that probably, yeah. This is the whole thing, is that, when the work that we do, the success that we've created, we want more of it.
Yeah.
And so again, this is when we realize, okay, so that first reflection point is, yes, I do want to scale the business. I do want to see how far we can take this thing. But I think the other reflection point that people might want to be aware of, do I need to be asking myself these hard questions, is, if that's your mindset and your goal, that's great. But if you're in a situation where you're still small enough, you haven't built the stability around your work, that you're still kind of making decisions, not necessarily strategic decisions, about long-term success. You're really just trying to kind of keep the lights on day to day. You're making decisions out of desperation or out of necessity. If you're in that situation, and then this is something that, you may find yourself in the technical founder paradox, but you can't do anything about it. You don't have the ability, the infrastructure, the cash flow, or anything to kind of take any other approach than you as the founder, or the founders that you're working with, have to kind of do it all, because there's no other option.
Yeah.
So where we kind of say, when we talk to businesses and we kind of identify that we think we're hitting the technical founder paradox, is when they do want to scale, and they do have the stability and the infrastructure, the profitability, that they can actually do something and actually start to make those really smart strategic decisions to avoid falling into the paradox, and avoid their current situation holding back that big success they're aiming for.
Yeah. And it reminds me of kind of another story or situation that we've seen with the founder of a private school,
Right.
um,
Yeah.
who had done, like, I have so much respect for and empathy for these people, because they have built successful businesses. Like so this particular one, they had started 2 campuses, acquired 2, and were looking at acquiring or building a third. I can't remember. Um, but they had 100 or so staff with them, serving a great, like a good population of students. A lot of things, in a lot of ways, you would consider this to be quite a successful small business. And they were along a number of dimensions. But the problem was, the founder, while very skilled in the delivery of educational resources, had major tunnel vision
Mhm.
and was unable to really remove those blinders and realize that, not only do I now need, like, we're now managing 4 and now looking at a 5th and 6th, like they had plans to continue
Mhm.
growing. Managing that many sites requires somebody who's not just skilled in as a teacher or as an educator, but as an administrator, as a leader, as a facilitator, like facilitating these opportunities and resources for the people that they lead.
Mhm. Yeah.
And sorry, it's we've seen this so many times in so many cool businesses that um, really require just a bit of either self-awareness or some identification of where the problems lie.
Well, this business in particular, again, kind of met those two kind of reflection point criteria that I mentioned
Yeah.
before. They had big scalability, big scaling goals, big growth goals, and they
They
actually
had
had
positive revenue and
the
resources.
stability, the cash flow, the
Yeah.
reputation. They had all the tools they needed to, to do it, but it was what they weren't doing was they weren't taking the time to kind of say, is the skills that got us to where we are what we need going forward, or do we need other pieces? And I remember this one in particular was really apprehensive that they needed help, because the idea of, well, I got this far, so why can't, of course I can take it further. The way, status quo is working, so why would we ever change?
Yeah.
And it's funny, if to you listening, this might sound like where you work, and I apologize if it does. But these are the kind of things where we need to realize, this is not an uncommon problem. I mean, we've seen this. I mean, I say we, like, general, most people have seen this kind of with like restaurants. You ever have like a really great restaurant that's like just killing it and everyone loves it? So they're like, wow, let's try and, open more locations. And then they do, and then the business completely collapses. Not to say that's only because of the technical founder paradox, but often that scalability goal is, they're like, well, what's working for us while we're small? Well, it'll definitely work for us if we get bigger.
Yeah.
And that idea of falling into that paradox where the people that, got you to where you are, may not have all the skills needed, or all the abilities to get you to the next stage. So sometimes it is something where, you really do need to realize that a lot of businesses that we do see kind of try and hit that next level end up collapsing and losing their stability because they didn't go at it with the right strategic intent.
Yeah.
So let's try to into some warning signs, because to make sure that, to help people identify, how do I avoid this as we go forward?
Well, what's really funny is in every example we've talked about so far, one of the biggest negative effects that was, or outcomes as a result of this, was just absolutely terrible retention of employees.
Yes, that is one of the biggest warning signs. You're right.
It in every now, obviously we see this very, very frequently because this is one of the niches that we work
Work.
in,
Yeah.
right? So, like with the private school example, they had huge aspirational goals, but couldn't hang on to staff and had trouble recruiting people. When they acquired new locations, they would bleed employees.
Mhm.
These types of retention problems can be indicative of many very damaging issues, including this technical founder paradox. It was the same with the engineering founders.
Yeah.
Um, they had grown the business. They paid well, especially for, like, they were very competitive within their industry and region. Um, but they had a lot of trouble hanging on to their field staff were okay because they were out of the office, but anybody who was kind of required to have a lot of regular interactions with the founders did not stay because they didn't have those skills to be able to manage people effectively. And that was the tunnel vision. They had the tunnel vision on product rather than people.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So again, retention is something that, obviously, because of the work that we do, is one that we see the most, but it's also a significant red flag
Mhm.
that, and again, this was part of the keynote that I gave, was why I brought it up there too. But it's also beyond the retention issues, it's also, we also see this a lot with stagnating business development.
Yes.
Is that, when you're not able to, when you're seeing the difficult times, actually, getting, fulfilling your growth commitments, or people or you're missing deadlines and timelines, often, to be honest, going back to retention, because you don't have the employee base to fill
Mhm.
that. But you kind of feel like you cross a threshold. You're like, well, why can't, we were able to fill it before, why can't we fill this now, even though it's more? But so that stagnating business development can be that the growth side of it is stagnating because you're just not able to meet your responsibilities because you just don't have what's needed to hit that next level.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. And I think what's related to that as well is if there is one division or department that seems to be just carrying the whole company,
Right.
that could be another warning sign. So if you are, well, I'll use the engineering example again, very focused on the technical specs. And I mean, product should lead, product needs to be important. But if every other part of the business seems to be lagging behind in productivity, in performance and outcomes, and it's very, still very focused on just that technical skill that the founders have, there's a good chance you are gonna hit that wall pretty soon.
Yeah, actually, that lopsided growth aspect of it,
Lopsided, yeah.
it is actually a really great sign too, because like, so for example, if even the product side, if your sales are excellent, but your expenses are super high because your procurement and your supply is, you really haven't done.
It's reactive because you don't have somebody in that role to be able to dedicate that skill set.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Or if you provide a great product and you provide a great service, but no one knows about you, you're like the best kept secret in town. Then the idea, maybe your sales and marketing, your marketing and advertising is something that might be, is a skill set that's lacking. And what's great about being able to have kind of some clear warning signs is, again, they're just that we're not saying if if you have this one problem, you definitely have the technical founder
Mhm.
paradox, but these are the kind of those reflection point questions. Are we seeing issues with retention? Do we have lopsided growth? Is our stagnation of our business development kind of happening? And do we are we trying to scale, and do we have this ability to actually start to make the effective decisions because we have the stability, and we have that cash flow and infrastructure to allow us to do it. If all this kind of sounds familiar and kind of comes to mind, this is a really important point for a business, whether you're in the business as an employee or whether you are one of the founders, to really kind of say, are we standing in our own way?
Yeah.
So I think it'd be wise for us to move on to what can we do about it.
Yeah. So obviously the crux of the problem is a mismatch in skills. Right. So it's a technical founder with blinders who isn't aware of the gaps, or it's that skill mismatch. So there's a few ways that you can address that. If you want to continue being involved in everything, then you are going to need to upskill your own knowledge. If you are a solo founder, or even as a team, then your team is you need to um, identify and build some skills that are complementary to the technical expertise that you already have developed. I
Mhm.
think I said I used the language earlier of it's the difference between a depth of knowledge versus a breadth of knowledge.
Mhm.
And I like that because with the technical founder paradox, that depth of knowledge was so important early on, but now you need to take a step back and look at the breadth of skills that are required in order to be successful. Upskilling is absolutely an option there, and there are lots of ways that you can accomplish that.
Mhm. Well, I mean, and think about it too. It's like, what the founders have to realize is you're not a teacher anymore. You're not an engineer anymore, right? Yes, you still have the license and
Yeah,
you might identify as that, but your everyday is not that
you're a
anymore.
CEO or a COO or a
Yeah,
CMO or a
right.
CHRO.
Right. So you have a new job, and so what is the skills that you would need to hire in that job? That's what you need to be now.
Yeah.
And it's something that, sometimes it just takes that point of going, okay, I haven't upskilled myself. I haven't had time for one.
Yeah.
But now, again, if we're in a situation where we want to grow strategically, and we have the structure to allow me or me and the leadership team or whatever to develop these new essential skills to level up and hit that and hit
Yeah.
that our next goals, then we have to do that. Because, if we're too busy to do it, then we're just like, okay, we're just hitting the snooze button on achieving our goals. And if that's the reality of it. Either you carve out the time and the resources to do it, or you're just going to hit the snooze button on your sustainable growth. And I can't always say it's that the success will wait for you, right? If you wait too long, you might miss your window.
So much about timing is critically important in business.
Absolutely.
You had a comment in a previous episode when we talked about where we talked about technical founder
Mhm.
paradox that I thought was really good. And I'm going to try to, it was essentially that along the lines of what you just said, you are no longer qualified for the job that you have, right? As an engineer, doing the engineering and product development, yes.
Mhm.
As the CEO who is now responsible for all aspects of the business, you
Mhm.
may no longer be qualified for the role that you're actually performing,
Yeah.
which is again, it happens very organically. And I don't want this to be a criticism because it really isn't. I have a tremendous amount of respect for founders who are able to grow and build sustainable and scalable business. It is not flipping easy.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yes. And it's just more of that. It's real talk. You are maybe unqualified.
Unqualified for the realities of the role.
Yeah. So what do you do about that? Well, then if you want to maintain that job, then become qualified. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's real talk. That's truth of it.
The
Now,
good news is that your boss will probably cut you a little bit of leeway
yeah,
while you're learning the new skills.
exactly. So yeah, so what can we do about it? Step one, if you want to stay in the job, it's upskill. Another option, so option two, is to build the team you
Yeah.
need to achieve those goals. If you don't have the capacity, the interest, or or the time in order to do that, then you're going to need to get those skill sets to you. So this might look like, revising or adding on to your leadership team. Maybe your leadership team needs to be beyond the people that have been around the longest time, and maybe it needs to be about bringing the people in that are going to provide the right insights, the right skill sets, right? So we talked about this with like strength-based teams. We did an episode. We talked about about fit, and we outlined kind of different ideas about how the generalists and specialists and everything
Mhm.
else like that too. But I mean, if you're people dependent on your growth and scalability, then hiring people experts to help you do that. If you're trying to maintain the most effective, um, you know, um, cost for your supply in order to build your products, and bringing in experts in procurement, and you know what I mean? So you might
Supply
need.
chain logistics and like
Exactly, yeah.
so
So
many skills that can be helpful. You need to take a strategic approach to how you acquire them.
yeah, I mean, it might be weird for you to be like, we're gonna bring a bunch of new strangers into this company that we built, 20 years ago or 10 years ago, whatever it is, and instead of promoting within. But if that skill set doesn't exist, if you want to hit that next level, you kind of need to go to where the skills are to bring them to you. You're probably gonna need to pay for it. But the thing too is like,
Absolutely going to have to pay for it.
absolutely. But the thing too is that this is one of the benefits of kind of the rise of fractional work. You may not need to, you know,
Mhm.
jump in and hire a bunch of new C-suite directors with absorbent with crazy salaries. You might have a good cash flow, maybe not that good a cash flow.
Yeah.
But the idea of having fractional help, you kind of come in and kind of in that more advisory role, in that more upskilling role, build capacity internally, whether your fractional person becomes your CMO or they help you build a marketing team or whatever it is. it's about, bringing in the skills that are going to allow you to have that strength-based approach. You can do more of what you're good at, and you have someone else doing more of what they're good at. And then you have all you need to hit that next level.
Yeah, and I like that comment around using them to build capacity internally.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it when companies have a focus on internal growth,
Mhm.
on developing their people. That is such a great mentality to have around skill development, people development, and can be an incredibly powerful retention tool.
Yeah.
So if you don't have the skills right away, a stopgap fractional while you're developing your internal capabilities could be a really interesting solution to that.
Absolutely. And especially if your goal is, okay, we can only afford fractional, in for the next 4 years, but if they help you hit that next level, then it's a matter of, okay, now we can look at permanent people, whether it's upskilling people that have been working under these fractionals for the past 4 years, or whether it's bringing them on full time, or whatever it is. Your options are available to you
Yeah.
because you successfully hit the next level with strategic intent.
The last one that I want to talk about is going to sound kind of weird, but honestly, there's also the opportunity if you are a highly skilled technical founder and that's what you love to do, there's nothing wrong with stepping back from the responsibility of doing everything and
Mhm.
stepping into a niche that you really enjoy.
Yeah.
And I remember working with what stands out for me was a company that we were working with that is kind of a key component in the supply chain for mining industry,
Oh,
providing equipment and safety equipment and a number of different widgets that are required,
yeah.
whole gamut of things. And the owner was such an amazing human being anyways. um they were hitting this same problem
Mhm.
of they were spending all of their time and energy having to manage the day-to-day operations of the business, and they honestly hated that.
Mhm.
What they loved to do was to build the relationships, to be out networking, to find new clients, to be more in that sales leadership role.
Mhm.
And what was so great about that project was actually being able to work with the founder, the owner, to put the solutions in place to identifying somebody internally that can take over, guiding them, offloading those responsibilities from the owner to the new operations manager who could run all of the day-to-day responsibilities. They were ecstatic because they got a promotion and more money. And ultimately, the owner was far happier because he was able to step back from having to do everything and step into what he really loved to do, which
Mhm.
was which was talking. I mean, the guy could talk forever. But he was very charismatic. He was very personable. And you like the networking, the relationship management side was such a natural gifting for him.
Yeah.
And it was so cool to see that develop.
Well, and that's just it, is that there are a lot of owner founders that hate their job.
Mhm.
And it's because what got them into the work, because had to hold on to, for whether it was a self-imposed or for whatever reason, they're doing the job, not the job that got them into the work or that they built for themselves. They have a job where they're all the stuff that they like to do is they had to give it to someone else.
Mhm.
And it's, again, part of it is like, well, I'm the owner, I should be the CEO or I should be the president. Like, I mean, like, I'm not going to be an employee in my own company. Like, that's not why I did this. But for some people, they're like, well, the different approaches. Well, why am I, as the owner, the most miserable person in the company? Why, why can't,
I worked for somebody else for 20 years and hated every minute of it. So I started my own business and hate every minute of it.
yeah,
Like,
but like, yeah,
no.
but if it's stuff that you like to do or that you're good at or that is or really, is relying on you, then stepping away from the stuff that is not and stepping into your niche to allow for you to do what you're good at that you enjoy doing, but then having people that maybe work around you or sometimes even above you, depending on the structure, but to allow you to be very successful, and very, very wealthy doing a job that you love doing, right? I mean, it's not, I mean, we've
Your
seen,
ownership doesn't change.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like we've seen kind of some of this in hospitality and in restaurants too a bit, where like the founder is the chef, and they're, and as they grow they never really leave the kitchen. They're still in the kitchen. They just bring on other people to be the general manager, and this, they're still the owner. They still call a lot of the strategic shots, but the general manager, they kind of still, they somewhat report to, but at the same time, like, it can be a bit of a fine-tuning act to try and get the right kind of relationship and the right flow going. But I mean, when you have someone that is is vital towards one component, then let them do that and let other people who have the skills, background,
Yeah.
education, whatever it might be, to do everything else. That you don't have to be, as the owner, be the CEO or be the
Yeah.
president. That it is an option to step back and find your niche. It's not a common one. We don't see it a lot, but it's one at least worth considering.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of what we've talked about can be summed up by saying that there are a lot of responsibilities and there's a large breadth of knowledge that's required to scale a company.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do it all yourself.
Yeah.
There are solutions to it. And if you continue to operate with tunnel vision, then you are going to hit a wall.
Yeah.
You will be blindsided by the things that come from out of left or right field because you're just moving forward.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, I think I'll just do a very quick summary.
Cool.
But yeah, so the question was, what is the technical founder paradox? Well, ultimately, it is for businesses that are trying to scale, that are in a situation where the founders, the owners, like got them to this point of being a successful, viable company. Their skill sets that got them to where they are might be the skill sets that are holding back their ability to hit the next level. Where we see this in any business that has kind of the technical expertise of often the product or service to kind of deliver, or that's being delivered, and a lack of skills in business operations, people management or other aspects that are essential towards the business's scalability. So again, there's two good reflection points that people need to realize, is this where we are at? And one of them is, are you moving away from being a lifestyle business where you're just where you're happy with that ceiling and you want to, and you're successful as you want to be, trying to move into a scalable business where the sky's the limit? And are you in a situation where you're not making decisions out of desperation or out of necessity, where you actually can make the strategic, smart, long-term decisions because you have the stability, cash flow, infrastructure, or whatever? Some warning signs, or if you're falling into the technical founder paradox, is if retention of core operational positions is a challenge, holding on to good people. If you're stagnating your business development because you're just lacking and missing in what's needed for growth, or if you have lopsided growth, where the area that the founder has significant expertise in is doing much better than other departments, and you're not able to kind of, grow effectively, sustainably, across the board. So what can we do about it? Well, there's three options. We can either upskill ourselves as the founders to be able to develop the skills and have a larger, instead of having that depth of knowledge, having the breadth of knowledge to be able to kind of, be able to do all aspects of our work. We can actually bring in the people and build a strength-based team to have the expertise around us that allows us to be able to, have these essential required capabilities to perform the functions of a scaling business. Or we can step back and find our niche and just do the parts that we really enjoy with our job, and let other people who have the skills to be able to deliver the higher level growth and scalability. Let them worry about that, and let you as a founder actually have a job in your own business that you actually enjoy. All right, that about does it for us. For a full archive of the podcast and access to the video version hosted on our YouTube channel, visit roman3.ca/podcast. Thanks for joining us.
For more information on topics like these, don't forget to visit us at roman3.ca. Side effects of this podcast may include improved retention, high productivity, increased market share, employees breaking out in spontaneous dance, dry mouth, aversion to the sound of James's voice, desire to find a better podcast.